He was just a soldier, chained, beaten. Moments away from death, the alien queen had already spoken his fate. Execution at dawn. But then, her daughter walked into the throne room, looked straight into his eyes, and in front of the entire court, she kissed him. Now the queen's empire is in chaos. Old laws have been broken, and a war is about to ignite. But no one in that room knows the truth. No one knows why she did it, or what secret that kiss just unleashed across the galaxy. And when the truth comes out, the blood of two worlds will burn in the same fire. The alarms had been ringing for minutes before Ryan Holt even realized the battle was lost. His ship, the Resolute, had been surrounded by the alien fleet, their black spiked warships blotting out the stars. The bridge shook with each impact, consoles exploding in showers of sparks, and the cries of his crew filled the air. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and running out of time. He had tried to rally them, shouting orders, but the next blast tore through the hull, sending him tumbling into darkness. When he awoke, the world was cold and unfamiliar. The smell of metal and burning oil lingered in the air. His wrists and ankles were bound by glowing chains that bit into his skin every time he moved. Around him, alien guards in black armor stood like statues, their weapons humming with lethal energy. The corridor was narrow, the walls made of some dark alloy that seemed to drink in the light. Ryan kept his eyes forward as they pushed him along, refusing to give them the satisfaction of seeing fear in his face. They took him through massive gates that opened into a chamber unlike anything he had ever seen. The air was heavy, almost alive, filled with the low hum of alien machinery and the distant echo of chanting voices. At the far end, sitting upon a throne carved from the bones of creatures he could not name, was the alien queen. She was tall, her skin a pale silver that shimmered under the torchlight, her eyes glowing like twin suns. A crown of black metal curved over her head like the horns of some ancient beast, and her armor was edged with jagged spikes that caught the light with every move. Her gaze locked onto Ryan the moment he entered, and a slow, cruel smile spread across her lips. "Human," she said, her voice smooth but carrying the weight of 1,000 battles. "You have spilled the blood of my people. You will die." For it, the guards shoved him to his knees, and Ryan met her eyes without a word. The queen studied him for a moment longer, as if expecting him to beg. When he didn't, her smile faded into something colder. She raised a hand, and the chanting grew louder. "At dawn," she said, "your head will fall." The crowd roared their approval. Chains tightened around his body, forcing him forward. But in that moment, Ryan's gaze shifted. Just beyond the queen's throne, standing half in shadow, was a figure he hadn't noticed before. She was younger, her skin a deep emerald green that glowed faintly under the torchlight, her hair long and red like molten fire. She wore no crown, but her armor was lined with the same royal crest as the queen's. Her eyes, like her mother's, did not burn with hatred. Instead, they studied him with a strange curiosity, as though she were trying to see past the man, in chains to something deeper. She didn't move, didn't speak, but there was something in her stillness that unsettled him more than the queen's threats. The guards dragged him away, through twisting corridors and down into the damp, echoing dungeons beneath the palace. The cell was little more than a hole in the ground, the walls damp and cold, the floor littered with chains from prisoners who had come before him. He sat in the darkness, listening to the distant sound of the alien city above the grinding of machinery, the hiss of steam, the deep pulsing hum that seemed to come from the planet itself. Hours passed, or maybe days, he could not tell.
Ow!
Then, without warning, there was movement outside his cell. A shadow slipped between the bars of light, and the door opened with a whisper of metal. She stepped inside, the same emerald-skinned woman from the throne room. Up close, her features were sharper, her presence even more commanding. Her armor was lighter now, almost ceremonial, and her hair fell loose over her shoulders. Ryan rose slowly, his chains rattling. "You," he said, his voice low, "you were watching me." She tilted her head slightly, as if the sound of his voice amused her. "You did not beg," she said simply. "Most humans do." He met her gaze. I'm not most humans. Her lips curved into the faintest smile. She took a step closer, her eyes scanning his face as if searching for something. My mother will kill you, she said, almost as if testing his reaction. Then I suppose I should make my last hours count, Ryan replied. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then she leaned closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. There is a way to live, but it will cost you everything. Before he could answer, the sound of boots echoed in the corridor outside. She straightened, her expression once again calm and unreadable. Do exactly what I tell you, she said, her eyes locking with his. Tomorrow. And then she was gone, vanishing into the shadows just as the guards returned, their eyes sweeping the cell as if suspecting something had happened. Ryan sat back against the wall, his mind racing. She hadn't told him her name, but her presence lingered in the air like a promise and a threat all at once. Somewhere above, the Queen was waiting for his execution. But now there was something else waiting too. Something he didn't understand. Something that might just change everything. The morning came with the sound of heavy boots and clanging metal doors. Ryan hadn't slept, not because of the cold floor or the constant hum of alien machinery, but because of the words she had whispered to him in the darkness. There is a way to live, but it will cost you everything. He didn't know what she meant, but he knew she hadn't been lying. Her voice had carried something dangerous, something final. The guards unlocked the cell with a hiss of steam and pulled him to his feet, their grip unyielding. They led him through a labyrinth of steel corridors, past cells filled with other prisoners who stared at him with empty eyes. He wondered how many of them had been promised a way out, and how many had found it only at the end of a blade. Air grew warmer as they climbed higher into the palace, and soon they emerged into a high-arched hallway lined with tall pillars carved from some dark, glittering stone. Strange alien banners hung between them, each marked with the royal crest. The Queen's guards stood at attention along the walls, their armor reflecting the dim red glow from the torches. At the far end of the hall, the great throne room doors loomed towering slabs of black metal inlaid with veins of glowing silver. Ryan's heart pounded, not with fear, but with something sharper. Whatever was coming, he had no choice but to face it. As the doors opened, the sound of the crowd inside washed over him a low, eager murmur, like predators waiting for the kill. The throne room was packed with alien nobility, their eyes glowing faintly as they turned to watch him enter. The Queen sat on her throne, a vision of cold power, her gaze fixed on him as if he were already dead. And there, standing to her right, was the princess. Her emerald skin seemed to catch the light, her long red hair flowing over her shoulders like molten fire. She was watching him again, but this time there was no stillness. Her eyes held a quiet urgency, silent message only for him. The guards shoved him forward, forcing him to his knees before the Queen. She rose slowly, the movement alone commanding silence from the crowd. This human, she said, her voice carrying across the vast hall, has slaughtered my warriors and defied my empire. His fate will be a warning to all who challenge the crown. At dawn, his head will. She didn't finish. Clear voice cut through the air. Mother, wait. Every head in the room turned toward the princess. Ryan felt the tension shift. Instantly, as though the air itself had been pulled tight. The Queen's eyes narrowed. Soraya, she said, her tone like a blade. You dare interrupt my judgment? Soraya stepped forward, her gaze never leaving Ryan's. This man does not deserve to die. Not yet.
Oh.
Murmurs rippled through the court, whispers of disbelief. No one interrupted the Queen's decrees, not even her own blood. The Queen's lips curled into a dangerous smile, and why not? Soraya's eyes seemed to harden, though her voice stayed calm. Because there is more to him than you see. She closed the distance between them, her steps deliberate, every movement drawing the attention of the crowd. When she reached him, she knelt not in submission, but in defiance and placed her hands lightly against his face. Ryan's breath caught. He didn't know what she was about to do, but he knew it would change everything. She leaned in, her eyes holding his for a single frozen heartbeat, and then her lips touched his. Gasps erupted around the hall, the sound sharp and startled. The kiss was brief but powerful, and when she pulled back, her voice was steady. "By the law of the blood kiss," she said, turning to face the queen. "He is under my protection. He is royal blood now. You cannot kill him." For a moment, the throne room was silent. Then the queen rose from her throne, her steps slow, deliberate, the air growing heavier with each one. "You think to bind me with ancient law?" said softly, dangerously. "You think this will save him?" Soraya stood her ground, her chin lifted. The queen's eyes burned brighter, and for a long moment Ryan thought she might strike her own daughter down right there. But instead, the queen smiled a slow, terrible smile. "Very well," she said. "He will live. For now. But if he is to wear the blood of my line, then he must prove himself worthy. At first light, he will face the trial of the Colossus. If he survives, he may keep his life. If he fails—" She let the words hang in the air, unfinished but clear. The crowd erupted in a roar, some in excitement, others in disbelief. Ryan's chains tightened as the guards pulled him back, but his eyes remained locked on Soraya's. She had just thrown him into a storm far greater than the execution she had saved him from. And yet there was something in her gaze that told. Him, she believed he could win. He didn't know why. He didn't even know her, that the game had changed. And now, he was playing by her rules. The cell felt smaller that night. The air thicker, as if the walls themselves were leaning in to listen. Ryan sat against the cold stone, his mind turning over everything that had happened in the throne room. The kiss had been unexpected. Yes, but more than that, it had been dangerous. Whatever this blood kiss was, it had forced the queen's hand. He was still alive, but only because Soraya had made a move so bold it left the court reeling. Now the price was clear. The trial of the Colossus. He didn't know what it was. But judging from the whispers he'd overheard as the guards dragged him away, it was not a trial meant to be survived. Footsteps echoed down the corridor, slow and deliberate. He looked up, expecting guards, but instead the figure that stepped into the dim torchlight was Soraya. She wore no armor tonight, only a dark cloak that hid most of her form. Her hair spilled from beneath the hood, catching the faint light like embers. The door to his cell opened without a sound, and she stepped inside, the scent of something, faintly sweet, following her. "You should not be here," Ryan said quietly. She smirked faintly. "Neither should you, yet here we are." She crouched down, her eyes scanning his face. "The trial will kill you if you go in unprepared." "Then tell me what it is," he said. "Tell me how to survive it." She hesitated, her gaze flicking toward the shadows beyond the doorway. Then she leaned in closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "The Colossus is the Queen's champion. A creature bred for war, stronger than anything your kind has faced. It has never been defeated. The trial is not a fight. It is a slaughter." Ryan's jaw tightened. "Then why put me in it?" "'Cause it is the one test she cannot rig without breaking the law. The same law that saved you today binds her. Now, if you survive, she must let you live. She is counting on you to die." "And you?" Ryan asked, his voice low. "What are you counting on?" Her eyes met his, and for a moment he thought he saw something flicker. Their fear. "Maybe, or something deeper. I am counting on you to surprise her," she said.
Ah!
"And to survive long enough for me to explain why I am risking everything for you." Before he could ask more, the sound of armored boots clanged against the metal walkway outside.
Soraya
Rose, pulling her hood tighter. "Listen to me, Ryan Holt. The Colossus has one weakness. It is slow to recover after a strike. Do not try to match its strength. You will fail. Make it miss. Make it angry. Then you will have one chance." She stepped back into the shadows just as two guards appeared at the end of the hall. They glared at Ryan, but said nothing as they locked the cell behind her. When she was gone, Ryan leaned his head back against the wall. He was still a prisoner, still facing certain death. But for the first time since his capture, he felt the spark of something else. Not hope, not yet, but a challenge. Morning came too soon. The The guards returned, dragging him from his cell. His chains were removed, replaced by a set of crude leather bindings that allowed him to move his arms just enough to fight. They marched him through the palace, past towering gates, and out into the open air. The roar hit him first, thousands of voices chanting in unison. The alien crowd packed into a colossal arena that rose like a mountain of black stone. The sand beneath his boots was deep red, stained from battles long past. Across the arena, a massive gate began to rise, and the crowd fell into an expectant hush. Then it stepped out. The Colossus was unlike anything Ryan had ever seen, towering nearly twice his height, its body a mass of muscle and plated armor, each step shaking the ground. Its face was hidden behind a jagged mask of bone and steel, and in its hands it carried a weapon longer than Ryan was tall, glowing with deadly energy. The queen sat high above in a royal box, her silver eyes locked on him. Soraya stood still as stone, her expression unreadable. The gates behind him slammed shut. The Colossus began to move forward, slow at first, but each step faster. Then the last. Ryan's heart pounded in his chest. He remembered her words, make it miss, make it angry. The crowd's chant rose again, the sound like a living thing pressing against him. The Colossus raised its weapon, the air around it crackling with heat. Ryan tightened his grip on the crude spear they had given him, every muscle tense. And then the monster charged. The ground shook. The crowd roared. Ryan moved. And in that first heartbeat, as the weapon came down, he knew that one wrong step would mean his life. He also knew he had no intention of dying today. The first strike came like a thunderbolt, a blur of metal and energy that split the air where Ryan had been standing a heartbeat before. He rolled hard across the sand, the heat from the Colossus's weapon searing the back of his neck. The crowd roared its approval, their voices a wall of noise that rattled in his skull. The Colossus turned with terrifying speed for something so massive, its armor plate shifting with a grinding sound like stone on stone. Its glowing eyes locked onto him again, and Ryan understood immediately this wasn't just a brute. It was a predator, trained to hunt and kill in front of thousands. He tightened his grip on the spear, the wood rough in his hands, his pulse steady despite the danger. The monster stepped forward, each footfall sinking deep into the sand. Ryan remembered Soraya's voice in the darkness. Make it miss. Make it angry. The Colossus swung again, a sweeping arc meant to tear him in half. Ryan ducked low and darted under the strike, sand exploding around him as the weapon crashed into the ground. A sound low and guttural rumbled from the Colossus's throat, the first sign of frustration. Ryan circled, forcing it to turn, buying himself moments at a time. Up in the royal box, the queen watched with a cool, almost amused expression, as though she were simply waiting for the inevitable. Soraya stood beside her, her hands gripping the railing so tightly her knuckles were pale against her green skin. The Colossus attacked again and again, each strike heavier and faster than the last, but Ryan refused to meet it head-on. He moved like a shadow, letting it burn through its energy. The crowd's chant began to shift from eager bloodlust to something else: confusion, curiosity. The human was still alive. Ryan's lungs burned, sweat running down his back, but he kept moving, kept forcing the creature to swing and miss. Then, in a single heartbeat, the opening came. The Colossus overextended, its massive weapon burying itself in the sand for a fraction of a second too long. Ryan lunged forward, driving the tip of his spear into the small gap in the armor. It sighed. The strike wasn't deep, but it was enough to make the beast roar in pain, staggering back a step. The sound rolled through the arena like thunder. Soraya's eyes widened. She had told him there would be one chance, and this had been it. But the Colossus was not finished. It dropped its weapon with a crash and charged barehanded, its massive arms swinging like battering rams. Ryan dodged the first strike, barely avoided the second, but the third caught him in the side, lifting him from his feet and throwing him hard into the sand. Pain flared white-hot in his ribs, and his vision blurred, but he forced himself to stand before the crowd could see weakness. The Colossus loomed over him, reaching for his throat. Ryan twisted away at the last instant, grabbing a fistful of sand and hurling it into the creature's face. The monster recoiled, the glowing eyes flickering. Without thinking, Ryan surged forward, driving his shoulder into its side and slamming the spear into the same wound he had made before. This time, the strike went deeper. The colossus bellowed, stumbling to one knee. The crowd erupted, some in shock, others in outrage. The queen rose slowly from her throne, her gaze sharp, calculating. Ryan stepped back, chest heaving, watching. As the giant struggled to stand, then, to his surprise, it stopped. The colossus's breathing slowed, its massive head turning toward him. And then, in a voice so low only Ryan could hear, it spoke. "You fight well, human." Ryan froze. The alien's next words were even stranger. "The queen is not your only enemy here. There are forces that will burn both our worlds. Survive this, and we will speak again." Then, with a roar that echoed through the arena, the colossus fell forward, slamming into the sand. The trial was over. The crowd erupted into chaos. Some shouted for Ryan's death anyway. Others chanted his name, their voices strange and rough in his ears. Up in the royal box, the queen's expression was unreadable. But Soraya's was notch relief, sharp and bright, mixed with something else. Something that told Ryan this fight was far from finished. The guards moved toward him, their weapons ready, but he didn't take his eyes off the queen. She had tried to see him die in the arena, and he had lived. That alone had shifted the balance. But the colossus's words echoed in his mind, heavy with meaning. There are forces that will burn both our worlds. Whatever he had just survived was only the beginning. And somewhere deep down, Ryan knew the real trial hadn't even started yet. They did not take him back to the dungeons. Instead, the guards led Ryan through the inner halls of the palace, their armored boots striking in unison, echoing through the massive corridors. The air here was different, thicker, heavier, carrying the faint scent of incense and something metallic like blood. He knew this wasn't a path for a prisoner. They were taking him somewhere important, or somewhere deadly. They stopped at a pair of tall doors carved with alien symbols that seemed to shift and twist if you looked at them too long. Without a word, the guards pushed them open and shoved Ryan inside. The chamber was vast and dimly lit, lined with columns that reached so high they disappeared into shadow. At the far end, the queen stood with her back to him, gazing out at the alien city through a wall of black glass. The spires of her empire rose against a sky filled with swirling green storms, lightning flashing far in the distance. "You survived," she said, her voice smooth but edged with steel. She turned slowly, her silver eyes scanning him from head to toe. Few ever leave the arena alive. Fewer still do it without begging for mercy. Ryan said nothing. The queen stepped closer, her presence filling the room like a wave. "Do not mistake this for mercy," she continued. "You live because my daughter's defiance has bound me to our ancient law. But that same law gives me another choice, one that will be far worse than death if you fail." Before he could ask, the doors behind him opened again. Soraya entered, her emerald skin catching the light, her expression carefully guarded. She glanced at Ryan briefly, then looked at her mother. "What are you planning?" The queen smiled faintly. "If the human is to wear the blood of our line, then he will serve our empire and prove himself on the battlefield." Soraya's jaw tightened. "You mean to use him as a weapon? I mean to test his worth," the queen replied. "He succeeds. He earns his place. If he dies, the law will be satisfied, and I will have lost nothing." She turned back to Ryan. "There is a rebellion on the edge of our territory. They grow bold, threatening trade routes and supply lines. You will lead a squad of my soldiers to crush them." Ryan frowned. "And if I refuse?" The queen's smile widened. "Then I will see to it that you vanish into the void, and no law will save you." Soraya stepped forward, her voice tense. "Mother, this is madness. You are sending him into a trap," yes, the queen said simply. "And if he is clever enough to survive it, perhaps I will begin to believe he is worth my daughter's foolishness." She gestured sharply, and the guards moved in. Ryan was escorted out of the chamber, but not before he caught Soraya's eyes again. There was something there, warning, urgency, maybe even fear. Hours later, in the palace armory, Ryan was fitted with alien armor. The plates sleek and dark, etched with patterns he didn't understand. They handed him a weapon unlike any he'd held before, lightweight, humming faintly, its blade shifting colors as it moved. His squad was waiting outside the gate's den, alien warriors, each armed to the teeth and glaring at him with open disdain. As they marched toward the docking platforms, Soraya appeared at his side, moving quickly to match his pace. She spoke without looking at him. "This is not a simple mission. Those rebels are not your enemy." "Then who are they?" he asked. She hesitated, then lowered her voice. "They are the only chance you have of leaving this planet alive. The Colossus. The one you fought. He is one of them." Ryan slowed slightly, the words sinking in. "You want me to join them?" "I want you to listen to them," she said. "There are things you do not know, things my mother will never tell you. If you fight for her, you will be killing the wrong people. And if you kill them, you will be sealing your own fate." The docking platform loomed ahead, a massive alien dropship waiting with engines humming. The squad boarded, and Ryan followed, Soraya's words echoing in his head. The hatch closed with a hiss, sealing him in with soldiers who would gladly see him dead. As the ship lifted into the storm-filled sky, Ryan sat in silence, his hand tightening around the alien weapon. Somewhere out there, beyond the lightning and the clouds, the rebels were waiting. And he didn't yet know if he was going to kill them or join them. The alien city shimmered under a blood-red sky as Captain Elias woke to the cold metal floor of his cell. His wrists ached from the restraints, and his mind spun from fragmented memories of the ambush. The last thing he remembered was the sound of heavy alien boots closing in, and now he was here surrounded by walls that hummed like they were alive. Across the corridor, shadows moved. He could hear muffled voices, alien in tone, low and commanding. But one voice stood out, a softer one, hesitant, almost trembling. When the guards left, a figure stepped forward. It was her, the alien queen's daughter. Her emerald eyes locked on his, with something unspoken, fear, defiance, maybe even curiosity. She whispered something in her language, a sound like silk sliding over steel. Before placing a finger over her lips to silence him, Elias didn't understand her words, but her urgency was clear. She turned sharply when heavy footsteps returned. The queen herself entered, draped in armor that gleamed under the pale light, her gaze cold and calculating. She spoke to her daughter. In sharp tones, her voice a blade cutting the air. The daughter lowered her head, but Elias noticed her hands trembling slightly. Then came the sentence. He didn't need a translator to understand it. The queen pointed at him and gestured in a way that was universal: execution. His heart pounded, but he kept his face blank, refusing to give them the satisfaction of seeing his fear. The guards grabbed him, their claws digging into his arms, dragging him through endless corridors that seemed to stretch forever. The alien city pulsed with strange energy, its towers glowing faintly, casting shadows that moved unnaturally. Elise's instincts screamed that this place was alive in ways he couldn't comprehend. They reached the execution chamber, a circular hall, with walls etched in glowing runes. The center held a raised platform where prisoners knelt before the queen's judgment. His knees hit the cold surface, and the metallic taste of fear filled his mouth. The queen stepped forward, holding a weapon that looked like a cross between a blade and lightning itself. She raised it slowly, her eyes never leaving his. The air was thick, almost vibrating. And then everything stopped. A sharp cry broke the tension. Her daughter had stepped between them, her arms spread wide, her gaze fierce in a way that seemed to shake even the queen. Gasps rippled through the gathered crowd. The queen's eyes narrowed, her voice a low growl that made the very floor tremble. The daughter's reply was bold, each word like a challenge. Elias couldn't understand the language, but he didn't need to. He could see the story playing out in the way their eyes locked the mother's power against the daughter's defiance. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then, she leaned in and pressed her lips to his. The chamber exploded in shouts, some of rage, some of shock. Elias froze, not from the kiss itself, but from the knowledge that, whatever she had just done, had changed everything. The Queen's expression shifted from fury to something colder, darker, and Elias realized this was no rescue. It was the beginning of a war. The alien fortress was no longer silent. It pulsed with chaos. Sirens wailed, guards shouted in their harsh language, and the air was thick with tension as Captain Elias was dragged back to his cell. The kiss, that one reckless act by the Queen's daughter, had turned the entire hierarchy upside down. Elias could feel it in the way the guards shoved him harder, their claws digging deep into his skin, as if they wanted to hurt him for the dishonor she had caused. But through the noise, through the fury around him, he could still see her eyes. In his mind, steady, unflinching, as though she had chosen this madness on purpose. Hours passed in darkness. He could hear footsteps outside, sometimes slow and deliberate, other times frantic, as if orders were changing by the minute. Then came the metallic hiss of the door opening. It wasn't the guards, it was her. She slipped inside like a shadow, her breathing fast, but her movements precise. In one hand, she carried a strange device-part blade, part glowing crystalline in the other, a bundle wrapped in alien fabric. Without a word, she dropped the bundle at his feet. Inside was food, water, and a translator chip. Leah stared. At her, unsure if this was trust or a trap, she pointed to the device, then to him, speaking softly in her own tongue. When he didn't move, she knelt beside him and pressed the chip against his temple. A sharp flash of heat burned through his skull, and suddenly he could hear her voice in English. "You don't have much time," she whispered, her voice trembling but fierce. "My mother will not forgive me. It will kill you and me, unless we leave tonight." Elias blinked, trying to process her words. "Why help me? You barely know me." Her gaze faltered, but only for a second. "Because I know what my mother will do with your world if she wins. Because I've seen the future, ain't your." In it, before he could ask what she meant, the corridor outside erupted with shouts. She moved quickly, cutting his restraints with the glowing device. "Follow me. Don't speak." They slipped out of the cell, into a side passage, one Elias hadn't noticed before. It was narrow, lined with strange, pulsating veins of light that seemed to watch them as they passed. He could feel the fortress itself reacting, the hum of the walls changing like it was alive and aware of their presence. They reached a high balcony overlooking the alien city. From here, Elias saw the full scale of it for the first time, towers like twisted spires, streets filled with armored troops, and above them all, massive floating warships shaped like blades hanging in the crimson sky. It wasn't just a city, it was a weapon waiting to be unleashed. She grabbed his arm and pulled him toward a hidden lift carved into the side of the structure. "This will take us below the walls, but once we're out, you must not stop running, my people. They don't. Forgive traitors." The lift shuddered and began to descend, the alien light around them flickering erratically. Elias kept his eyes on her, trying to read the truth in her face.
Always.
But before he could, the lift stopped, halfway jerking violently. A voice crackled. Through the air, deep and venomous, it was the Queen. Her words echoed in both their minds through the translator, dripping with malice. "Daughter, bring him to me now, and I may let you live. Refuse, and you will watch your human die before I burn your future to ash." The daughter's fingers tightened around her weapon, her jaw set. She didn't answer, just pressed the blade into Elias's hands and whispered something that chilled him to the bone. "If we can't escape, you must do the unthinkable." The lift jolted back into motion, but slower now, as if the Queen herself controlled every gear and chain. Elias gripped the alien blade tighter, the weight of her last words pressing down on him like a mountain. The unthinkable, he didn't know what she truly meant. Kill her. Kill the Queen, or something worse. But the way her eyes had locked on his told him she had already accepted the cost. The hum of the fortress deepened, turning into a low, rhythmic pulse that seemed to throb in his chest. It was no longer just machinery. It was the heartbeat of something ancient and aware. Watching them descend, when the lift stopped again, They stepped into a cavern carved into the base of the fortress. The air here was colder, heavy with the scent of metal and burning fuel. Massive pipes ran overhead, carrying streams of molten energy toward the warships above. Alien engineers moved along the catwalks, their armor glinting in the dim red light. They hadn't been spotted yet, but Elias could feel the walls closing in. The Queen's presence crawling through the shadows. The princess led him toward a massive, arched tunnel. Its floor slick with a strange black liquid that hissed when it touched his boots. "This way," she said, her voice low. "Leads to the wastelands. If we make it there, they won't follow." Elias glanced back at the fortress towering above them, knowing escape wouldn't be that easy. The Queen's forces were everywhere, and the sound of armored feet began to echo down the corridors behind them. They ran, their footsteps splashing through the liquid. Alarms wailed overhead, and the walls around them began to shift, panels sliding open to reveal hidden weapons, their barrels tracking every movement. A burst of energy shot past Elias's head, scorching the tunnel wall. The princess spun, slicing through one of the turrets with her blade, the crystal flaring brighter with each strike. They burst into the open wasteland, vast desolate expanse under a blood-red sky. The ground was cracked and broken, dotted with jagged spires of stone and pools of the same black liquid. Far in the distance, Elias saw movement, something massive, crawling across the horizon like an insect made of steel. The princess froze, her eyes wide. "No," she whispered. "She's unleashed the hunters." A deep vibration rolled through the ground, and Elias realized the massive shapes were moving faster, straight toward them. The princess grabbed his wrist, pulling him toward a cluster of shattered rock. They dove behind it just as one of the hunters slammed into the ground nearby, a towering machine with legs like scythes and a body covered in glowing runes. Its head swiveled slowly, scanning the terrain with beams of light that cut through the dust and ash. Elias's heart pounded. He had seen war. He had faced soldiers and weapons he didn't understand, but this thing felt alive. "Like a predator smelling blood," the princess whispered. "If it finds us, there will be no fight. Only death." She reached into a pouch at her side and pulled out a small spherical device, pressing it into his palm. "If I fall, you throw this into its core."
Don't.
Hesitate. Hunter stopped moving, its head turning in their direction. The beam of light swept over the rocks where they hid. Elias's grip on the sphere tightened. The princess met his eyes, nodded once, and mouthed a single word. "Now." Elias rose, ready to throw, and the hunter suddenly froze, its light flickering. Somewhere far above, the fortress boomed with the sound of something tearing through the sky. Elias glanced upward, just in time to see a massive human warship break through the crimson clouds, its cannons already glowing. The Queen's voice roared in his head again, louder than ever. "You will not take him, daughter. You will not take my future." The hunter's lights blazed back to life, brighter, faster, charging for the kill.